Welcome, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman. Thank you for joining us. Rabbi Moshe Lichtman wrote an amazing book, amazing sefer called Erets Yisroel and the Parsha. And this week we're going to read in shul, in synagogue, we're going to read Parshas Tetzaveh and just the background of what's going on over here. Where are we up to in Jewish history, and what can you tell us about Erets Yisroel from the Parsha?
Okay, well, I'm gonna start since it's Tuesday, so it's still considered part of the last week.
Oh,
And Truma and Tetzaveh is really a unit. They go together. It's about building the Mishkan. It's about bringing the Shekhinah into this world. And that's really our purpose in life. That's why the Ramban famously says that Sefer Shemot is really the Sefer of Hageulah, because it starts with us getting out of Egypt, but it ends with the real Geula, which is bringing the Shekhinah down to Am Yisrael in the Mishkan. But I think there's something important to point out here. I know we're in Truma, and it's going to be a little bit of a while till we get to Vayikra, but I have a beautiful idea in my book on Parshat Vayikra. We all know the famous small aleph in Vayikra, right? And there's a lot of different explanations as to why the word Vayikra is written with a small aleph. Very strange. And the Zohar says that it's because this kriya, this calling that Hashem did to Moshe, which is, of course, Sefer Vayikra is Torah Kohanim. It's all the laws of bringing korbanot and of Kohanim, how they do the korbanot. So he says this kriya, this calling, was really imperfect, just like a small aleph. It's imperfect because it wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. So even though there's no question that we reached a very high level by having the Shekhinah rest amongst us in the Mishkan, but that wasn't the end-all be-all. That was not really the end goal. The end goal was to, as you said prior to the show, you said, interestingly, they were commanded to build a Mishkan, but they were supposed to go into Eretz Yisrael within a few weeks. The only reason we wandered around the desert for 40 years was because of the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies. So it was supposed to be a very short time. But why would Hashem command us to make a Mishkan, a tabernacle, for a few weeks, or maybe even less than a few weeks? Obviously, it was supposed to be brought into Eretz Yisrael, like actually happened. I mean, the Mishkan mostly stood in Shiloh and Nov and Giv'on, right? Different places in Eretz Yisrael, until we were ready to build a permanent house for Hashem, the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. That was going to take hundreds of years. The Mishkan stood for 369, if I'm remembering correctly.
Shiloh was 369, then 14 years in Givon, and then 44 years in Nov.
Right, and of course in the Midbar for close to 40 years. So because we weren't going to be able to build one in Yerushalayim for quite a while, this was going to be the temporary structure that we were going to serve Hashem in. So, says the Zohar, it's not really full and complete in the Midbar, in the desert, which is in Chutz La'aretz. Only when we get to Eretz Yisrael can the aleph be large, could it be the real thing. So that's, I think, an important introduction to all these parshiot, to Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakel, Pikude, which are all about the building of the Mishkan, that the goal was to get into Eretz Yisrael and to serve Hashem there, first in the Mishkan for a few hundred years, until we finally build in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh.
It's interesting to note that the Mishkan in Shiloh, which is only an hour drive from Beit Shemesh, and we're actually planning a trip, our night kollel, we're planning a trip to go there when the weather gets better.
Okay.
So when they
invite me, I'd love to come.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So the Mishkan in Shiloh actually had the bricks.
Permanent walls, more
permanent walls, but it used the entire Mishkan. It had the Mishkan inside of it, so it had both the Mishkan, and that was bringing
semi-permanent, but not totally.
Okay,
yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, Very nice. So with that background, I think we have to get into, let's first talk about Truma. Um, it's a beautiful idea. I said it over the Shabbos and Shul, and it's like, it really blew people away. Um, we know that there's a mitzvah to say in the Torah, the Rambam counts it, everybody counts it, to build a Beit HaMikdash. That's one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, to build a temple to God. And it includes many other mitzvahs, building all the different kelim of the Mishkan and the Mikdash. When the Sefer HaChinuch, right, who counted the mitzvah, when he got to this mitzvah, he gives a whole lengthy introduction and explanation of the idea behind the Mishkan and the Mikdash. And then at the very end, like he usually does, where he tells us when does this a mitzvah apply, to whom does it apply, he says this mitzvah only applies when the majority of Am Yisrael is in Eretz Yisrael. It's not a personal mitzvah, it's a communal mitzvah. It's for Am Yisrael as a whole to build the Beit HaMikdash. So there was a tremendous gadol in the late 1800s named Rabbi Yoshua Kutner. He happened to have been one of those gedolim. He was really like one of the foremost poskim of the generation. But he was also one of those that was pro the whole return to Eretz Yisrael that was just starting in his days.
Can you repeat his name?
Rabbi Yoshua Kutner. He was known as Kutner from Kutno. I don't know what his official last name is, but he's known as Rabbi Yoshua Kutner.
Okay.
His sefer, his Shelot Teshuvot, is called Yeshuot Malko.
Okay.
Shoot Yeshuot Malko. And in fact, we talked about last time, Eimah Banim Smecha quotes him several times, especially in the approbations. Anyway, he asks an unbelievable question, which, you don't think of. He says, if that's really true, that the mitzvah to build the Beit HaMikdash is only when the majority of the Jews come to Eretz Yisrael, how did the Jews build the Beit HaMikdash in the days of Ezra? We know from the book of Ezra that only 42,360 Jews answered his call and came to Eretz Yisrael.
Of which 113 were specifically mentioned by name as intermarried.
Right, exactly. They were not exactly
the religious who came.
The most religious Jews in the world, correct. And so, first of all,
and Ezra didn't ask them to divorce until after they built. That's like he was mochel them. He said, just go build.
Just come and let's build. Yeah. But just numbers-wise, 42,360, there were estimates are around 2 million Jews at the time in the whole world, most of them in Bavel. And a tiny percentage comes to Eretz Yisrael to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. What about the rule that the Sefer HaChinuch said that it has to be the majority of the Jewish people? And you can't say, okay, they built it, but they didn't have the majority, so they built it anyway. Like, there's nothing wrong with building it. That's not true, because it's not an individual responsibility. It's a responsibility of the klal, of all of Am Yisrael. So how could it be that such a small percentage of Jews, led by the Gadol Hador Ezra? The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that had the Torah not been given to Moshe Rabbeinu, it would have been given to Ezra. That's how great Ezra was. He was number 2 to Moshe Rabbeinu. So, okay, they had a great leader, but everyone else was not on that level. Besides the fact, as you pointed out, and just numbers-wise, it was such a small minority. So how could they have built a Beit HaMikdash? So the Yeshuot Malko says as follows. He says, he answers it based on a Gemara in Chagiga, Daf Tetzaveh, which says that every person in the world is born with a clear slate, of course, without any nitiyah, without any inclination towards one way or the other. He can make his choices in life, either to be a tzaddik or to be a rasha. But the person is born with a chelek in Gan Eden and a chelek in Gehenna. Every person born has a chelek in each one. And it's up to him to decide which way he's going to go, which chelek he's going to get. But then the Gemara goes on further and says, a person who becomes a tzaddik, he not only gets his portion, but he also gets the portion of the Rasha. Because a Rasha forfeits his portion in Gan Eden and gets his portion in Gehenna. So it ends up that tzaddikim have more portions because they take all of the portions of Gan Eden of all the Rishayim, and the Rishayim have extra portions of Gehenna because they take the Gehenna that really belongs to, that the tzaddik was born with, which he forfeited, sort of, and he rose above that, and he got rid of his chelek in Gehenna. So based on that, the Yeshuot Malko says that the same thing is true here. Every Jew at that time had the ability to come back to Eretz Yisrael. As I said, the Gadol Hador, the Gadol of almost every generation, Ezra HaSofer, called them to come back to Eretz Yisrael. They could come. They had all the opportunity to come, but they chose not to. So basically what they did is they forfeited their share in the Gan Eden of Eretz Yisrael. And all the Jews, the 42,360 Jews who came back to Eretz Yisrael, they got all of the chalakim of Eretz Yisrael that the Jews in Chutz La'aretz had forfeited. And now it ends up, in terms of chalakim, in terms of portions in Eretz Yisrael, the majority was there. Because the few Jews who were there got all of the rewards, all of the chelek, all of the portions of Eretz Yisrael that were forfeited by the Jews in Chutz La'aretz. And therefore they were considered like the majority, and therefore they were able to build the Beit HaMikdash. Is that unbelievable?
Wow!
That is
Wow!
Such an unbelievable idea.
So no, I want to just repeat what you're saying. What you're saying essentially is that every Jew and Eretz Yisrael are connected. That means that when a person, for instance, Elazar HaKohen, he was the one who, al piv, they were machalak Eretz Yisrael, right? When they came into Eretz Yisrael, and Elazar was the one who kept quiet when Moshe got upset at Aaron. He kept quiet, and because the Medrash says because he kept quiet, therefore through his mouth, every person, and there's a debate if every Shevet came, but pretty much every person came, and there was a box there, and the box spoke. He would put his name inside, and a voice would come out and say, "You belong in this exact spot." Right. And they gave him the deed and the title, and he went and he built his place in the Shomron or wherever he was. I hope I get Yehuda. I love that. I love Judea. I think it says in Yecheskel, at the end of Yecheskel, how the Gerim, the converts, where do they get their portion? They don't have a tribe, and I think everybody today is, and the pasuk says they get wherever they choose. So if you choose, and the pasuk says this, says whatever the ger who comes into Eretz Yisrael, whatever portion he chooses, that's his place. I think today we could all say we're gerim. I don't know anybody who could claim that they don't have. Well, maybe from the
Eliyahu Hanavi, one of Eliyahu Hanavi's jobs when he comes is going to be to tell everybody which tribe they belong to.
Yes, yeah, okay.
So, I assume there's plenty of Jews who have pure lineage.
Yes, yeah, okay. The Kohanim for sure, but they don't have maternal. They don't have maternal lineage, but the maternal isn't used. Right. And I get this question a lot: what tribe? But getting back to Elazar, so he's giving out. So one of the questions I had before we go on to the next thing, one of the questions I had always was, and I found the answer to this was, how is it possible that when the Jews came in, Reuven, Gad, and Chetzi Menashe were outside the land? So how is it that the land was able to give up itself? Meaning the land was missing something. It was missing part of the full set. We need all of Klal Yisrael inside of it. And I saw that in Shara Psukim, he goes extensively explaining why Reuven, for instance, needed to have a portion outside of Eretz Yisrael, because Reuven, when he was conceived, thought he was with Rachel, and he was actually with Leah. So there was a thing. Menashe, for instance, Menashe was the one who put the cup in Binyamin's backpack and caused the brothers to rip their garments. So half of him, mm-hmm. and it's interesting, just as a final thought on this, is that Menashe is the only tribe that half was inside and half was outside. And if you look, the Benos Tzlafchad, the daughters of Tzlafchad, were the four daughters whose father perhaps was a person who was Machal Shabbos and was killed, and some people say he did it on purpose. But these Benos Tzlafchad play a central part of the story of the Jewish people, and three times they're mentioned. And in the book of Joshua, I think that they're mentioned twice, and they're described in great details and repetitively. And the final story of Bamidbar, the ending of the Torah, because Deuteronomy is just a repeat. The last story of the Torah is Benos Tzlafchad. That's the final message of every. So what's so special? So the answer is very simple. Benos Tzlafchad were ben Chefer, right? And that means that they came from the portion of Menashe that had a property, a big house in Chutz La'aretz. And they said, no, we want to choose to be from the Menashe people who are in Eretz Yisroel. And they took, and this is written, I don't remember the source. I'll write it on the screen when I look in my notes. They decided to choose a place in Eretz Yisroel, even though they had a big place. And that's why the Torah puts Benos Tzlafchad, these daughters. It's not just about women's rights. It's about the women who were
Eretz Yisrael,
the women who didn't sin with the
sin of the Meraglim. And
okay, that's my word. The floor is yours. Okay,
let's
go on. Let's continue.
So this concept is unbelievable. Especially, you want to apply it to today's day and age. It's unbelievable. We're repeating history. This is exactly the same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us the opportunity to come back to our land, and many Jews are just forfeiting their share in Eretz Yisrael, and their share is just going to be given over to other Jews who are here, who are sacrificing and coming to Eretz Yisrael, as this beautiful idea of Rav Yeshua Kutner illustrates. So it's very funny. So I said this over last Friday night in Shul. Our Rav was away for Shabbos, so I spoke. And someone came to me just yesterday and said, based on what you said, you just took away all of the incentive to convince Jews from Chutz La'aretz to make Aliyah. Because, who cares if they make Aliyah or not? It's their problem. It's not mine. I'm going to get their share. And therefore, it's already considered as if the majority of the Jewish people live in Eretz Yisrael, and we could already go ahead, build a Beis Hamikdash, etc., etc. So, there's a downside because, that's their problem. Let them suffer. Why us? So I had to think for a second, but then I came to the conclusion that the answer is so obvious. The answer is, we're not doing this for personal gain. We don't want a situation where only half or 60% of the Jewish people come back to Eretz Yisrael and get all the portions of all of those Jews who live in Chutz La'aretz. We care about our fellow Jews. When I push Aliyah, it's not because I'm going to get anything out of it, not because I'm gaining anything. It's because I want them to gain. I want them to have the zchus to be living in Eretz Yisrael, to have their portion in Eretz Yisrael, not to forfeit their portion in this holy land. I care about my fellow Jew. It's like, why do we care about Jews who are off the derech? That's not their problem. Why is it my problem? They are the product of, thousands of years of galut. So Hashem is not going to punish them so badly because they're tinok shenishba. The answer is because, no, we care about every single Jew. We want every Jew to see the beauty of Torah and mitzvot, and the same thing is true here. We want every Jew to understand that this is their true heritage and not to give up their share in such a beautiful heritage that Hashem has given us. The land of Israel, this is where we belong. This is ours. This is where we can reach our fullest spiritual potential. Only here in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it's up to us to try to convince our fellow Jews, even though bottom line is, I believe that the Geula is going forward with or without them, but I just don't want them to miss out. So that's the first idea from this week's Parsha, from last week's Parsha. But again, it's all one. Truma and Tetzaveh are all the same. The other idea that I have in my book is from the Rashi, where it talks about when the Torah commands us to take atzei shittim, acacia wood, to build the Mishkan. What?
I got a lot to say on shittim. We'll talk. Yeah.
Okay. So what does Rashi say? I'll read it here. It's actually Rashi's quoting from a midrash. This is the midrash. Where did these boards come from? Where in heaven's name did Bnei Yisrael, Hashem, Moshe says to them, go bring some acacia wood? Where are they going to get that from? They're in the midbar. So the answer is that Yaakov Avinu planted them when he went down to Egypt. Hundreds of years later, 210 years before, when they first went down to Egypt in Parshat Vayigash, right? It was right away, Yaakov Avinu went and he planted seeds. And he said, because I know I have a tradition, Hashem told me that we're going to eventually leave this land and we're going to be commanded to build a Mishkan to Hashem, and therefore I'm preparing it now. I'm preparing this so that we'll have wood, and when you leave Egypt, you got to take these trees with you. And that was their tradition for 210 years. And when they left Egypt, they took this wood with them. And that's how they had the trees. So there's two amazing lessons that we can learn from here. First of all, this is an idea that I developed many times in Parsha, in Sefer Bereshit, that Yaakov and Yosef and all the great leaders of the Am Yisrael, our forefathers, they understood the dangers of galut, of exile, and they did everything in their power to make sure that the Jews don't get too comfortable in exile. And this is another example of that. Yaakov Avinu, you understand, they're coming down to Galut Mitzrayim, where, don't forget, their brother is the second in command. So, they're going to have a nice galus here. It's going to be pleasant. They have an inside man in the government. And Yaakov Avinu understood that his sons are liable to get too comfortable and to forget where we really belong. And therefore he planted these seeds. And you can imagine the first day they get there and everyone's unpacking. And Yaakov Avinu says, whoa, 1 second, I got to go do something. And they all follow him and they say, what are you doing? What are you planting? And Yaakov says, we're going to get out of here. And we're going to eventually be commanded to build a Mishkan. And this is what this wood is going to be for. It was to send his kids a message. Don't get comfortable here. This is not where we belong. This is just another stage in Jewish history, in the Galut, and it's only temporary. And we can't get too settled here. And therefore, that was the message. And every time they passed those trees, they probably said, like, what are those trees? Oh, right, these are the ones that Yaakov, 200 years later, when they're in the middle of the terrible bondage of Egypt, they're probably still looking at those trees. This is going to be our salvation. It's all because Yaakov Avinu had the foresight to understand that you have to send that message. Whenever you go into Galut, there always has to be something to remind you that you do not belong in Galut. That's message number one. Number two is the fact that if you really think about it, that we see from this that Yaakov prepared for the redemption. If I was Yaakov, I would have said, listen, Hashem is going to redeem the Jewish people. He promised us. He promised Avraham already hundreds of years before that at Brit Ben Abatarim that there's going to be, your children are going to be in exile in Egypt, or it doesn't say Egypt, it says Erets lo lahem, 400 shana, 400 years. We all know that it was, the 400 started with Yitzchak, and it was really 210. Lo mashaneh, it doesn't make a difference. And then afterwards, they're going to go out with Rush Gadol, with great wealth and everything. So Yaakov could have said, like, God will take care of everything. Don't worry. God, he's going to command us to build a Mishkan. He'll make sure there's some trees somewhere that we can cut down and we can get the wood. Nope, that's not what Yaakov did. Yaakov said, we have to prepare. We have to prepare for Galut. There's so many Jews today in Galut who have this attitude as, when Mashiach comes, I'll come. Hashem will do everything. Hashem will send me a personal magic carpet, and it'll pick me up in my community where I live in Chutz Laretz, and it'll fly me to Eretz Yisrael with all my luggage, everything, and of course I'll get a beautiful home in Eretz Yisrael. Sorry, but that ain't how it's going to happen. You have to prepare for Geula. You have to do everything in your power. And today, everything in your power is not like Yaakov. It was just to plant some trees. That was the best he could do 210 years before the actual Geula is going to happen. Today, we're living through the Geula. The best thing you can do is to pick up and come to Eretz Yisrael, because this is where it's going to happen. And every extra Jew that comes to Eretz Yisrael is another step closer to that final Geula. As we said before, you know, maybe if Jews decide not to come, they're going to lose their portion. But there's no question that the more Jews that come, the better it is, and the closer we will be to the final Geula. And that, I think, is another very important message that we learn from Truma, Tetzaveh, all these parshiot.
Wow, beautiful. Now, I want to.
It's all in this sefer. It's all in this sefer. Eretz Yisrael and the parsha.
So the idea, number one, from Yaakov Avinu was to prepare, and Yaakov Avinu plants these trees that are called shittim. Now, I just want to tell the listeners that this word shittim, these trees were used in the construction of the temple in three primary places. One was the Aron HaBrit, that had a gold box with a wooden box and another gold box. Right. And this theme continues. There were a mizbeach, and the mizbeach also was a wooden mizbeach with a gold plate. And there was also poles in it. And these poles also made out of this same shittim tree, and they're plated in gold. Now, the Jews had carried two things with them through the crossing of the sea: the gold of Mitzrayim and the wood that Yaakov had with him. And in the Mizbeach and in the Aron HaBrit, the two most important things, which is prayer and, even meditation. The idea of the Ketores was a spiritual process. And it was something that when we had the Ketores, it was a big deal. And that's why when Nadav and Avihu did it wrong, it was a big problem. But in Joel, Parak Daled, in the fourth parak of Joel, when it talks about the final redemption, it's a crazy book, Joel. If you ever read the Sefer, it's unbelievable. The story with the locusts coming in and eating everything up, and they daven and they pray and they plant and it grows, and it's the end time prophecies are all there. It says that the river of shittim will dry up. That the shittim represents stupidity. Galut, that's real shtut. And the Chazal, our sages tell us, chatu b'shittim, we sinned in shittim, laku b'shittim, we got punishment in shittim, v'nisrapu b'shittim, and we became healed through shittim. We need, and what that means is that we sinned when we came to the river of shittim. That's when Midian, this is going to get complicated, that's when Midian, Bilam had his idea, he's going to send the Bnot Midian, and to entice the Jewish people to sin, and it happens because they drink from the well of shittim, and then only through that Pinchas comes and he stops the Magefa, and then it is revealed. Then the redemption comes. There's another place where the Magefa is a plague. There was a plague as a result of the Jews sinning, and as the Jews sinned, the plague got worse. Pinchas goes and he notices that he needs to take action. He takes action. He stops the plague, and then there is a redemption. He gets kahuna. He becomes a priest. And I never found the source where it says Pinchas hu Elio. People say it's a Gemara. I never saw a Gemara say it. I don't know.
Wow.
Well,
it's a famous say. Yeah,
everybody says it, but I've looked for it. Maybe I don't know. But the concept is that Eliyahu Hanavi, even reincarnation is a relatively new thing in Jewish history. I'd say it hasn't been mentioned. Yeah, it hasn't been mentioned before 500, 600 years ago. It's not really a Talmudic idea, and it could be. Look, but it's now accepted. Who am I to say? But the idea being that there was a shittim was the Medrash is saying they sin in shittim, then they get punished in shittim, and then they get healed in shittim through the shittim, and meaning that the Gullus process needs to lead to something, and that place was when Bnei Yisrael, Emir Hashem, finally return, that's when the fourth parak of Joel comes into play, that we won't need to have stupidity. The world will begin to stand together and say, okay, it's not going to be that it's going to be a magical time and everybody's going to be, in their flying cars. It's going to be, people still go to work, like the Rambam says. I believe, I agree. I admit that there are many, many opinions of what it will be like, but ultimately the idea of shittim represents preparation for Gullus, going through Gullus, and then bringing it to the base of Mikdash and incorporating it into the just like the pans of the Korach's pans became on the Mizbeach HaNachoshes. They got knocked in. And the mirrors that the women brought that were copper, that got knocked in and became part of the Kior. And utilizing all the things that we have from Galut, we want the Galut people here, not just because we love Klal Yisrael, like you said, and I agree, but also because we need all the flavors. There's something that Galut adds to Klal Yisrael. An American, and when Lahavdil, Yisroel was not Jewish, but when he came to Klal Yisrael, he added something to it. But Kal v'chomer, I don't know how to say Kal v'chomer in English.
All the more so.
All the more so. It would make sense that every galut that we're in, and we have so many professionals and so much, the medical system is not so great in Erets. Some people argue, I think it's great, but yeah, come the good doctors. We need good doctors. We need good plumbers. We need good builders. We need new construction ideas. People in America know how to build out of wood. I was just in Judea 2 days ago, and there's plenty of place to build. Come build your own house. Come out here. So all of Galut serves a purpose, and we want that shtus. We want the American shtus. We want it here. Bring it here. Bring the big cars. We want to change the scene. We want to make Eretz Yisrael better. And everybody has what to offer. Every person, every Jew, like you said, has a portion in Eretz Yisrael, and you could give it up. Like the rabbi said, you could say, okay, someone else could sit in my home, and that's okay. That's okay, but it's a shame. Why would you not want to, have a front row seat and witness the miracles?
Right.
Yeah,
100%. Beautiful idea. Maybe we'll end with just a quick mention of Tetzaveh, since it is almost Parsha Tetzaveh. So it's interesting because my whole book, Erets Yisrael on the Parsha, is based on a few different achronim who I saw said explicitly that Eretz Yisrael is mentioned in every single parsha in the Chumash. That's how it started many, many, many years ago. I wrote I used to, first it started that I was teaching in a yeshiva, and each Rebbe had a certain day of the week that they would give a short little Dvar Torah after Shacharis. So my days was Wednesday, and I decided I'm going to give something about Eretz Yisrael to the students. And then eventually it developed into writing an article for an Aliyah website, Aliyah organization called Tehillah. It was sent out via email. And then eventually I put it all together and added a lot to it and put it together in this book, Eretz Yisrael on the Parsha. But it's based on, I've seen different achronim. Like, for example, the Gadol Minsk, if you know who that was, one of the Gedolim of 19th century Europe. He was like a super genius, Nukol Torah Kula, and he says explicitly in a letter that Eretz Yisrael is mentioned in every parsha in the Chumash. And I think it's Rav Meir Simcha Devinsk says it also, and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach also said it, and others. So I assume that that's true, and I started writing my book and giving my Divrei Torah. And I mean, all of Bereshit, it's hard not to find Eretz Yisrael in the Parsha. It's hard to find a part of the Parsha in Sefer Bereshit that doesn't talk about Eretz Yisrael. Everything's about Eretz Yisrael. All the promises to the Avot, I'm going to give you this great land. And even in Noach and in
What was your hardest Parsha to do?
So that's what I'm getting to. And Devarim is also simple.
Yeah, Devarim is easy.
And
Shmos is easy. Bereshit is easy. I guess Vayikra is going to be the hard one. Somewhere in Vayikra.
Yes or no? I didn't have so much of a problem. It was this week's Parsha. Tetzaveh. I had a hard time finding something explicitly that I could really write on. So you know what I did? I ended up writing an article called Behind the Scenes. And it's so interesting because this is also well known that this is the only Parsha in the Chumash besides Sefer Dvarim, by the way. People think it's like Moshe Rabbeinu, ever since he came on the scene in Parshat Shemot, there's not a single Parsha in the whole Chumash where Moshe Rabbeinu is not mentioned, except for Parshat Tetzaveh. It's not true. There's also places in Devarim, but Devarim doesn't count because that's Moshe Rabbeinu speaking. It's all a speech by Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, he's not going to mention his own name, right? But up until Devarim, from the beginning of Shemot, there's not a single Parsha without Moshe Rabbeinu except this Parsha. But is anybody going to say that Moshe Rabbeinu is not front and center in Parsha Tetzaveh? Va'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. The you is Moshe Rabbeinu.
But he's the story. Moshe. Why isn't he mentioned? So he still is the story.
Correct. So there's many different, explanations of why Hashem, it was a punishment because he said, Mecheni na misifracha asher katavta. So Hashem had to erase him from one parsha at least. Okay, whatever you want to say. But just because it's not explicit doesn't mean that Moshe is not there. Same thing is about Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, there's no explicit pasuk saying, you should come to the land or something about the land. It's not. Because let's think about it. Parshat Tetzaveh is about Big Day Kahuna, and then about all the korbanot that they're going to give when they inaugurate the Mishkan, and that's it. So it has nothing really to do with Eretz Yisrael. But everything in the Parsha has to do with Eretz Yisrael behind the scenes, because all the mitzvot that are in Parshat Tetzaveh, at least on the level of everlasting, eternal mitzvot, is only in Eretz Yisrael, right? Only in Eretz Yisrael do you need Big Day Kahuna. In the Beis HaMikdash, obviously, right? It's only in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, if you really look deeper, of course, everything in Tetzaveh is about Eretz Yisrael. All the korbanot and all the Big Day Kahuna is all about Eretz Yisrael. It's not about chutz. It's not a chutz la'aretz parsha. It's true that it's talking about the Mishkan in the desert, which is outside the land of Israel. But as I started, Vayikra with a small aleph teaches that that's not perfect. The service of Hashem in the Mishkan in the desert was imperfect, which is why the aleph is small, because Vayikra el Moshe, this is what you have to do until we get into Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael, that's the real deal. So too, all the mitzvot in Parsha Tetzaveh are really connected to Eretz Yisrael. They're all, the Sefer Chinuch writes, this only applies when there's a Beis HaMikdash. And of course, Beis HaMikdash is only in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, and only in Eretz Yisrael. So it really does have to do with Eretz Yisrael. But by the way, it's the only Parsha where you could really have maybe a little bit of a hard time finding.
But I think you answered the question. You answered the question. Two things are missing: Moshe Rabbeinu and Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu will come back to Eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu will come back to Eretz Yisrael for the first time. Moshe Rabbeinu said, "I'm going to be buried outside of Eretz Yisrael, so I'm going to help stop and bring people back. I want to come." Moshe Rabbeinu was waiting for Tchias HaMesim to come to Eretz Yisrael. And he's waiting. He's waiting for all of Klal Yisrael to come because he wants to come with you. Because he holds that he felt he prayed 515 times to come in. And this mitzvah, this parsha is actually the mitzvah where Hashem is giving Moshe in Shemayim. He's telling him that on Yom Kippur, when you come down with the second luchos, and you should tell Klal Yisrael that take the gold, take all the money from Mitzrayim and bring it to Eretz Yisrael, make a mizbeach, make a menorah, so we could be a light from the Beis HaMikdash where the windows went like this, so the light can go out and we could spread the light and help the world and all the goyim, all the nations, all the kings of every king will come here. The king of Swaziland will come here. Somaliland will come here and bring an offering, and they'll have to go to a badatz, Eda Charedis, kosher, according to every shita of bringing a carbon. They have to have it inspected, and that will be the biggest kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's always been when Yisroel comes, when Shlomo built the Mikdash, he went to Hiram. He wanted to involve the kings. We want everybody to recognize Hashem. And when we come from Chutz La'aretz, imagine an Israeli trying to do Hasbara for Israel. Imagine if something was like that. The world will look at him and say, You need an American. So if we have an American Ola who comes to Israel and is able to speak to the Goyim and Chutz La'aretz and tell them about Eretz Yisrael and tell them about the Nisim that we're witnessing. Thank you very much, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman. If you could lead us out with a bracha. Thank you.
Okay. Bezrat Hashem, we should be zocha. The bracha is that we should be zocha very soon to see the real mikdash rebuilt in Yerushalayim. Whether it's going to be rebuilt by God and come down from the heavens, whether we have to rebuild it, it's a whole machokes. I'm not going to get into that right now. But either way, we should be zocha very, very soon to see the rebuilding of the temple, where we can serve Hashem like we are meant to serve Him here in Eretz Yisrael, here in Yerushalayim, in the Makom HaMikdash, Bimhera B'Yameinu, Amen ve'Amen.
Thank you very much. Good Shabbos.
Take care. Good Shabbos.